can actually switch to dial-in. There should be a prompt for audio, and you can switch to dial-in if you prefer. That is also an option available. Okay, Anna, it sounds like some of you may not be having trouble with the Vimeo link. So, okay, hey folks, so we're about 8 minutes out now. Yeah, the Vimeo link, Gabriella, the Vimeo link you just posted there is not the most current one. So again, look for the chat box, look for updated Vimeo link. That's the one you want to click on. So we have 1,000 folks on already. That's great. We're about 7 minutes out from start time. We are doing our best to accommodate what we expect. Literally tens of thousands of people on this webinar today. GoToWebinar unfortunately can't handle that capacity, and we didn't expect this registration volume. So here we are, all navigating this virtual universe we're living in today. So very much appreciate your patience as we do this. We're pushing everyone over to Vimeo to try to live stream there. If for whatever reason you're not able to live stream with us there, I promise that we will be sending out a recording immediately following the event today, and you'll get all the resources. You'll get a copy of the slide deck. You get every single resource that is shared or discussed on the live event. So thanks again for being patient. We're doing everything we can here. Where's the chat box? The chat box is in the GoToWebinar control panel. You should see a word that says chat. You can expand that, and then within that, there's a Vimeo link, updated Vimeo link, and it ends in number 295. So that's the Vimeo link you're looking for. Richard, that is the most current link. Thank you. Hey, everybody, it's Preston Clark, Think HR. We are 5 minutes out from the start of the webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We are streaming this both on Vimeo and GoToWebinar. We're asking as many people to head over to Vimeo as possible because we don't have the capacity here on GoToWebinar. We did it. We officially broke GoToWebinar from a volume perspective, unprecedented volume today. So doing everything we can to accommodate the volume. Thank you all for joining. Really, really appreciate it. In the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see an updated Vimeo link. Please click on that and you'll be taken to a new page. Once you're in the new page, you can go ahead and close out of GoToWebinar. No need to keep both open, and we'll be streaming it live there. If for whatever reason this doesn't work out today, that you're not able to watch this live as we're navigating some technological complexities with the live stream, I promise that we will be sending out the recording almost immediately after the conclusion of the event today. You will get slides. You'll get SHRM HRCI information. You'll get everything that you would have gotten during the live event. So thanks for being patient with us as we work through this. We're expected to get started here in just a few minutes. And thanks again for heading on over to Vimeo if you were able to do so. L. Zimmerman, to respond to your question, that is correct. Hey everyone, Preston Clark with ThinkHR. We're just a few minutes away from getting started. Thanks for all of you who've joined early and who are bearing with us and me as we navigate this unprecedented event around COVID-19. We have some incredible information to share. Our presenter Kara is going to get started in just a few minutes. I am here as your fearless navigator, trying to figure out how to get everyone over to Vimeo. I know some people are having password issues and the like, but there is a Vimeo link in the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. We're trying to push as many people over there as possible so we can accommodate the volume. So thank you. If for whatever reason this experience doesn't work out for you today, I promise that you'll get a webinar recording within minutes of the webinar conclusion today. It will come with slides. You will get SHRM HRCI credit information, everything that you would have gotten on the live event. I promise we'll be sending to you in very short order. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so we are going to we're gonna get started here in just about a minute. I know everyone is joining right now. I think we're about to hit our limit on GoToWebinar, which is what we expected. So for those of you who are able to, we would encourage you to move over to Vimeo to create some space for people who have not heard this message but are trying to get in. And then, of course, can the volume be raised? Yeah, Kara will speak more loudly than I will. So I promise the volume will be better here in just a minute. No, Celeste, you're in this live with us, so you're in the right place. No, you shouldn't need to create an account with Vimeo. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. Again, my name is Preston Clark. This is a presentation today from ThinkHR. For those of you who know ThinkHR, we do educational HR and compliance related webinars, mostly for our partners and clients. This is an unprecedented time, so we decided to open this up to the larger U.S. employer base, and that was a tremendous response because we had over 30,000 people register for today's event. But that also created some challenges on our side as well. So a million apologies for those of you who are having technical difficulties. We're trying to get as many people over to the Vimeo link where we're live streaming as possible. We will be sending out a recording in short order. Thank you all for your patience as we navigate this. I'm just gonna let people have another couple of minutes to try to work their way in here before we kick this off with Kara. We have a great presentation for you, jam-packed with information, resources, and best practices around COVID-19. So let's give us just one more minute. Yes, you should see welcome to the webinar on your screen. We're glad you're here. That's what everyone should be seeing right now, whether you're on Vimeo. Yep. Should the Vimeo site look exactly like the screen that is on GoToWebinar? Yes, that is correct. Okay, and we're going to get started here in just a minute. Again, for those just joining, we're about to get started. I'm about to pass this over to Kara, who's going to kick us off and deliver an amazing presentation over the next hour or so on COVID-19. Again, if you're on and you're on Vimeo, great, thank you. If you're on GoToWebinar and you're trying to access it, if you're on GoToWebinar and you're able to move over to Vimeo, we'd really appreciate it. Unfortunately, what's invariably going to happen here is that there's lots of people who are not going to be able to get in. So we're doing everything we can to accommodate everyone today, but a recording will be sent out shortly after the webinar today for those of you who, for whatever reason, have any technical difficulties in receiving this information. Kara, I think with that, let's go ahead and get started. And if there are any technical issues and I need to jump back in, I will, but hopefully I won't need to step back in until the end. The stage is yours. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It is nice to be here with you today, even under these really trying conditions. We are going to be talking, of course, about COVID-19 and how that's impacting workplaces right now, and what we think you as HR professionals or payroll people or just general employees, owners, whoever you may be today, what we think might be useful for you to know and what we've gathered. To be clear, this is all new information for all of us. We're doing our very best to compile it as fast as we can and make sure it's accurate. updated this webinar, last night at midnight. I was adding things in that were new as of yesterday. And so things are changing rapidly. We are trying to keep up with that. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you get the deck for this webinar, not everything in it may be true 2 weeks from now, but we will be keeping our website updated with information as quickly as we can find it. Just a little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way. If you are on GoToWebinar and you're having trouble hearing me, click on that audio button. And it will give you a phone number. You can call in by phone instead. If you're having an audio problem and you're listening through your computer, it's almost certainly just a you issue and not an us issue, just from having done this a couple hundred times. So give the phone a shot if you're not able to hear me and you're listening on GoToWebinar. Also, SHRM and HRCI credit will be available for this. It's pre-certified or pre-accredited for SHRM. We will get you that code afterward. For HRCI, it's not pre-approved, but you can certainly self-submit. I have an SBHR. I self-submitted most of my credits last year, so that's totally doable. And we will send everyone a copy of this deck. It says within 24 hours there, but it'll probably be more like an hour or two at most. So you will get a copy of the slide presentation. Okay, let's take a look at our agenda. Today we are going to go over the current guidance from the CDC, sort of the latest things that have sort of come up in the last couple of days that might be a little bit different than what we all heard about a month ago. We'll talk about some sort of frequently asked questions with respect to illness and quarantine as it relates to your employees. And then we're going to go over the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That is now officially a law. So we will go through the details there. And then we'll spend some time talking about reducing hours, reducing pay, or possibly closing your business, and some things you may want to be thinking about, some best practices for all of that. All right, current guidance from the CDC. Yeah.
And sorry, Kara, just before you get started, I know many of you are on Vimeo and you're hearing but maybe not seeing the presentation. So we'll continue to try to troubleshoot that. We will be sending out the slides here in a few minutes, so you will get the full presentation. So in the worst scenario, you'll get a great oral presentation today, and in the best scenario, we'll get it fixed. But either way, you will be getting the slides and the recording of the full presentation with slides immediately after the webinar. Thanks.
All right. So current guidance from the CDC. First up here, we've got keeping the workplace safe is the title of the slide that I think a lot of you can't see. So what it says on the slide is that we want to, some of this is really basic, some of this is going to be a little repetitive. Some of it is kind of new. So obviously, stop handshaking. That might be really obvious. Implement fist bumps, preferably no touching at all. Waving from a distance is perfectly great these days. Have employees wash their hands when they get in the door and schedule regular hand washing reminders. So that's sort of the new part, as opposed to like just encourage people to wash their hands. It's like, no, send an email every hour, every 2 hours or whatever, reminding everybody to get up from their desk, stretch their legs and wash their hands. There are also some posters that the CDC has, really colorful, eye-catching posters. If you haven't printed and hung those in your bathrooms or your break rooms yet, I'd encourage it. Disinfect surfaces like doorknobs, tables, desks, handrails regularly. That's been said multiple times. I think what I would encourage you to do is to make that someone's job. Don't just leave wipes around and encourage employees to use them, but actually assign someone the task of going around maybe once an hour and disinfecting, the front doorknob, the microwave handle, the fridge door, etc. And then this is also a new one. The CDC is recommending increased ventilation. So by opening windows or adjusting air conditioning. We would also suggest canceling travel if at all possible. Sorry, I got distracted there because I was going to try something with GoToWebinar to see if I could get the screen to show again, but I don't know that it worked. All right. So cancel travel if at all possible. Only absolutely essential business travel should really be taking place at this point. Adjust or postpone large meetings. Use video conferencing. I know, some video conferencing can be quite expensive. Encourage people to use FaceTime or whatever they may have on their phones, or just regular telephone is fine too. But if you have the capability to use video conferencing or something more like it, do that. If in-person meetings are absolutely necessary, hold them in open, well-ventilated spaces and have people skip chairs or skip 2 chairs, just to create that space. And then eliminate any shared food you might have in the workplace. So if you've got, like a bucket of gummy bears or chips or nuts, even if you've got a scooper, I would just get rid of those for now. Don't trust people to use the scooper. There are still people out there who think that this isn't a big deal and they're not going to take it seriously. So for now, I would just eliminate any shared food in the office. There's also guidance on keeping public spaces safe. Some of this applies to all workplaces. Some of it applies just to workplaces that invite in the public. So the suggestions here are to use booking and scheduling to stagger customer flow. If you're still taking customers on a regular basis, do something to stagger that. When somebody calls to make an appointment, don't have 4 people come in at once. Have only 1 person come in at once. Try to limit the number of people in the facility at a time. Use online transactions where possible. This might be a great time to sort of test the waters of e-sales, e-business, getting a website up and running where you can sell your goods or services. Just a thought. I know we've got so much on our minds right now. It's kind of crazy to think about other ways to sell, but I suppose if there was going to be a silver lining here, it would be that maybe we're going to learn to do some things that we didn't know how to do before. You also want to consider limiting attendance at larger gatherings or the overall capacity of your space. So if you were a restaurant, a coffee shop, something where people come in and stay a while, you may want to remove tables or chairs to reduce capacity and create distance. Encouraging tap and pay is also a really good idea. So, Apple Pay, I don't know if it's called Google Pay, but the thing where people can, shake their phone at your reader. I love it. Encourage people to do that. And I suspect a lot of people are actually learning that trick right now themselves. And then provide disinfecting wipes and hand sanitizer at the door so people can use it when they're coming in and when they're going out. I know disinfecting wipes and hand sanitizer can be a little bit hard to come by right now, but if you can get them, I would certainly consider that to be sort of a top priority if you're still open and still inviting the public into your space. Another question we're getting a lot is, can we take temperatures or ask employees about their health like on a daily basis? Have an inquiry form and a temperature check. And the answer at this point is yes. Generally, measuring an employee's body temperature would be considered a medical examination, and it wouldn't be allowed under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Generally, medical examinations and medical inquiries aren't allowed unless they're like absolutely job related. So this normally wouldn't be. But because the CDC and state and local health authorities have all acknowledged that community spread of COVID-19 is happening, they've said, basically go ahead and take temperatures and ask questions. That is not going to be considered in a legal inquiry or medical exam under the ADA. What it could do for you, though, is provide a false sense of security, okay? Because just because someone has come in the door and they don't have a temperature and they don't have a cough doesn't mean they don't have this disease. It doesn't mean they couldn't spread the virus. So don't assume that because you've decided to take temperatures that now you don't need to worry about wiping everything down. The average incubation on this is 5 days. So most people for 5 days aren't going to look like they're even sick, and they're capable of spreading during that time. So keep that in mind. And if you are going to ask questions of employees about their health, make sure you're keeping that specific to COVID-19. So not like, how do you feel today? Or, tell me about all your body parts that hurt. But very specifically, like, do you have a cough? Do you have a fever? Do you have shortness of breath? They may ultimately come up with more common symptoms, but those are the three they're sort of functioning with right now. I will say one more time, because it still looks like you guys can't see the slides moving. We broke GoToWebinar, unfortunately, it seems, but we will send a copy of the slide presentation probably within an hour. So if you're listening in, great. I'm definitely going to say things that aren't on the slide, and we will get you a copy of this as soon as we can. And we apologize for the fact that the slides aren't working right now. Okay, let's talk about illness and quarantine specifically. So these are the sort of the questions that we've been getting over and over from clients, and we have fielded, I don't know, probably 10,000 questions at this point in the last few weeks. So the first question is about sick employees. If somebody's sick, can we send them home? Yes. I think that's probably kind of a no-brainer at this point. It might not have been 3 weeks ago, but now it is. If somebody has really any kind of sickness, you as an employer are free to send them home. I should say a contagious sickness, a virus. Like, for instance, if someone came in with a seasonal flu or a bad cold, you could certainly send that person home on any given day. But certainly under these circumstances, you can send someone home as well, and absolutely should if they're showing any of the signs of COVID-19. The follow-up to that is sort of like, when should we let them come back? Well, they should talk to their healthcare provider about that. The decision to stop isolating at home needs to be made on a case-by-case basis, and it needs to be made by doctors or state and local health departments, not by you. Keep in mind that the 14 days, that's an incubation period precaution. So if somebody goes home sick and they're even diagnosed, you don't need to make them wait at home for 14 days. Chances are their doctor will tell them that they can come back after just a day or two of having no symptoms. So we don't necessarily want to keep people home for weeks on end. Let their doctor make that choice about when they should return. All right, another question we're getting a lot is, can we require a note for an employee to return after they've used sick leave? Maybe they used it for COVID-19, maybe they used it for something else entirely. The answer right now is yes, such inquiries are permitted under the ADA, either because they're not disability related or because this pandemic situation is very severe. So they're justified under ADA standards as a precaution for a direct threat. So that was a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. The ADA gets talked about a lot when we're, asking for notes, asking about symptoms, asking about all the rest. The takeaway right now is that you could ask for a note, but you probably shouldn't. The CDC is asking that you don't. Certainly, you don't require something like written down on paper, signed in blood by that person's attending physician. What we want at most maybe is like an email from a local clinic that they went to saying they can come back to work, but preferably don't even ask for that much. Have a conversation with them and determine what is best. That's going to be a case-by-case analysis. And again, you can ask them, talk to your doctor. Does your doctor think you can come back? That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have to go into a clinic or go into urgent care to get that note. I think a lot of doctors are offering telephone appointments and video appointments at this point. I've got Kaiser, and I know they're offering that, and they're encouraging absolutely everybody to just call them or video as opposed to coming in person. So be open to that. For employees who are returning from being out sick for whatever reason. Another common question we're getting is, can we ask about symptoms if employees are out sick, but we don't know why? So the answer is yes, but you want to keep it specific to COVID-19. Again, just asking open-ended questions. How does your body feel? What hurts? that can get us into disability inquiry territory. We don't want that information. We don't want to know that they've got a bum hip or an anxiety disorder or anything like that. We don't need that information. We just want to know if they've got shortness of breath, fever, cough, or anything else that's sort of in that list of COVID-19 symptoms, okay? We've also been asked if employers can make an employee with a sick family member stay home. The short answer to that is yes. Again, that answer might have been slightly different a month ago, but now that we've reached pandemic levels, it's going to make sense to ask an employee to stay home if one of their family members is sick with COVID-19 or something that looks like COVID-19. So there are three levels of risk when it comes to contact with a sick person, particularly a family member: low, medium, and high. Someone who has taken extreme precautions may qualify as low risk, and then wouldn't necessarily be a risk to your workplace. But most normal human beings, acting like normal human beings, will have done things that put them into a medium or high risk category, in which case the CDC says they should either self-isolate or quarantine. So yes, if you've got somebody who's, mom, dad, kid, grandma, whoever's at home with them has COVID-19 or something that looks like COVID-19, by all means, you can ask them to stay home for that quarantine period. What we don't want to do is tell somebody to stay home because they have a relative who's undergoing chemo, or a relative with diabetes, or heart disease, or a history of upper respiratory infection. Unless, of course, we're going to have them work from home so they can make their full income. It's not your job to look out for the health of that third party. And disability discrimination can extend to those who are associated with someone with a disability. So if you find out that one of your employees has a mom at home who, just finished chemo, might be immunocompromised, sending your employee home without pay to reduce that third party risk, that could be disability discrimination. So let them make those decisions for themselves. That said, though, at this point, if you have employees who can work from home, you should send them home. I know that, there are certain areas that are, already on lockdown, working from home as much as possible. So I don't want to stand here and act like I'm the CDC. But assuming that, a good chunk of the people I'm talking to right now are in the more populous states. The more populous states, California and New York, for instance, are definitely taking a, if you can stay home, do stay home approach. So if you've got employees that you can send home, I would encourage you to do that. Here's another question we're getting commonly. Employees don't want to come in. Can we make them? And yes, you can enforce your attendance policy and basically get them in trouble for not coming in, as long as there's no legitimate threat and they don't require an accommodation. So if an employee is afraid to come in, they don't really want to leave their house at all, maybe, because they're immunocompromised, or they have diabetes, or they have upper respiratory problems, that's going to be a reasonable accommodation. So you've got ADA obligations still, and you should let that person stay home. If you are in a low-risk area of the country, the employee who doesn't want to come in doesn't have any risk factors, then yes, you can tell them that they need to come to work. Would I encourage that? I don't know. If you can live without them, I'd probably just let them stay home, because they're just going to be anxious when they come into the office, and they're probably not going to do their best work. But you could. Now, though, it's definitely the time to be flexible with your attendance policies if you can. Given that this is such a unique situation, I'd say changing expectations for a while right now would be understandable and would not erode your ability to enforce those policies in the future once life has sort of returned to normal, or the new normal, whatever that may look like. Okay, how about employees with they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody? So I'm calling it an nth degree of separation. We got a call probably almost 2 weeks ago now. There was an employee whose roommate was quarantined because the roommate's boss was quarantined because the boss might have run into somebody who might have had COVID-19. It was like 5 degrees of separation, and they wanted to know if they could make that person go home. In most workplace settings, the CDC doesn't currently recommend special scrutiny for people who are contacts of contacts. So if we've got all these degrees of separation, the CDC isn't currently recommending that, like, you know, anybody who's ever been near anyone needs to stay home. That said, you could ask that person to stay home if you want, but there are some risks there. So if you decide to send them home anyway, just out of a super duper abundance of caution, I would pay them for that time, and I wouldn't take it from their sick leave or their PTO bank. If they can work from home, fantastic. Just have them work from home and pay them like you usually pay them and expect them to do their work per usual. But if they can't work from home and you're making them stay there, I would suggest paying them. If you don't pay them, the risk is very unlikely that they could bring some kind of regarded as disabled ADA claim. I think that claim doesn't hold water at all, but they could sit at home and cook it up. I think it's more likely that if you send somebody home out of, you know, sort of paranoia, and they can't get paid for that time period, but they're going to sit there and stew on how to get back with you with a discrimination or a wage and hour claim. And those aren't that hard to come up with. It doesn't necessarily mean they're good claims, but any claim, any litigation, any getting of an attorney by an employee is going to cost you money and be painful in the future. So just be careful about sending people home out of, you know, a quote unquote abundance of caution if it's really not necessary. All right, so we're talking about work from home. We're maybe sending home everybody. I'm working from home right now. If my internet cuts out, it's because it's just, you know, regular residential internet. So when we're sending people home, we probably want to make some policies around that. So here are my suggestions for a work from home policy. First up, we want to address hours of work. We also want to talk about expectations regarding reachability, expectations regarding productivity, any check-ins we require, and any office expenses. So if they usually work 8 to 5 in the office and you want them to work 8 to 5 at home, just say that. You are expected to work your normal hours when at home. If you want them to be reachable by phone and messenger app for that full 8 to 5 stretch, make sure that's clear. A lot of people work from home, but, you know, maybe wander around using their iPad or their phone and they're not fully reachable. If you want to make sure people are fully reachable, tell them that. Expectations regarding productivity. This is where you might need a little bit of a reality check. Some organizations can work at full productivity. You might even find that people are more productive at home. But others, it's just not going to happen. They don't have all the tools they need. So, you know, say that you expect as much as they can possibly do, given that they've remained reachable and are doing as much as they can. But, you know, sort of in the back of your mind as their manager, you might want to cut expectations a little bit, particularly because a lot of people are home right now with children whose schools have been closed. And just realistically, people can't maintain 100% productivity in those settings. Also, if you want people checking in either with their subordinates or their managers on some kind of, you know, regular basis, make that clear in your policy. And then office expenses. So you don't want employees to think, oh, I'm working from home, I can just build myself a home office and then build a company. Make that clear. Some states have particularly strong reimbursement laws, like Illinois and California in particular come to mind. So in those states, you wouldn't want somebody running off, buying an office chair, and then trying to bill you for it, because at the end of the day, you might end up just paying because the laws are so sort of staunch. So make it clear ahead of time what office expenses are expected. things that are reasonable and necessary you should cover. Even if you're not in Illinois or California or another state with a reimbursement law, if you're sending people home to work and it's going to cost them some money, maybe they need to upgrade their internet. They do use a printer and they need, printer toner, notepads, pencils, whatever it may be. Let them know what your sort of expectations and limits are. The model policy I drafted recently said any expenses in aggregate above $40 should be approved. So like we're sending somebody home, they've never worked from home before. You can say, hey, the first $40, do whatever you want. Once you've spent more than $40, you need to run it by your manager. But we'll assume $40 will cover the really basic stuff, like maybe a mouse pad or a mouse, the first ink cartridge, whatever it may be. So just make that clear in your policy. And then I want to cover a couple of reminders about pay when it comes to sending people home. So if we have decided to close the business for half a day or 3 days, there are some things we need to keep in mind. So first up, for non-exempt employees, these are people who are paid by the hour and are entitled to overtime. They need to be paid for all hours worked, even at home. So if you've got non-exempt employees doing just a little bit of work at home here and there, that needs to be accounted for and paid. But outside of that, we only need to pay for hours worked. So that's different than exempt employees, which I'll talk about in a minute. So if we send a non-exempt employee home midday because there's no more business, we're sending everybody home for the day and for the next 2 days, we only need to pay them for hours worked. However, if you send them home before their shift is over, you might owe them reporting time pay, even if you send them home sick. So reporting time pay exists in, I want to say, like 11 or 12 states. California has it. New York has it. Sort of all the predictable states that have a lot of employment laws have reporting time pay. And what reporting time pay usually says is that if somebody comes in and you send them home partway through their shift, that you owe them for half of their shift or at least X number of hours. X is usually 2. A number of these laws do have a provision that says it won't apply for closures due to unforeseen business complications or acts of God. So certain states may have an exception where reporting time pay wouldn't be due under the circumstances where businesses are coming to a grinding halt and we've got a global pandemic. Others, like California, appears to still apply. If you're in California and you send somebody home, you should still check for reporting time pay and see if that's due. As for our exempt employees, if we close down midday or midweek and send them home, we need to remember the following. We cannot take partial day deductions from exempt employees ever. So if you send them home in the middle of the day, you still owe them pay for the entire day. You can fill in that second half of the day with paid time off, although generally you should only do that if you've got a policy that says you're going to, or you want to make a policy today that says, hey, going forward under the circumstances, this is how we're going to deal with partial days. We're going to take the hours out of your PTO bank. That said, if they don't have any money in their paid time off bank or their sick leave bank or their vacation bank, we're going to pay them for the full day anyway. That's the rub with exempt employees. We can ask them to do overtime or hours over 40 and not pay them extra. But there will be times when they don't work a full day or a full week and we still pay them the normal amount. That's just the whole point of being exempt. The base rule is if they do any work at home or any work anywhere during a work week, they're entitled to their full weekly salary. So if you decide to close down the business in the middle of the work week and send everybody home, your exempt employees are still going to be entitled to their full pay for the full work week. Exempt employees get paid even if you don't have things for them to do. There are only a couple exceptions to the full work week pay rule. One is that you can take a full day deduction if they take time for personal reasons. These are personal reasons they want to take time for, like, seeing their tax accountant, or, taking their kid to, a school field trip or whatever. You can't say, oh, I'm sending everybody home because we lack business and consider this a personal reason. That won't work. There's also an exception for full day deductions if the employee is actually sick and they do no work at all during the day and you offer a bona fide sick leave plan. So if all of those things are true in an exempt employee, and this is a full day for sickness, then you could take a deduction. Granted, if you've got paid time off or sick leave, we're probably going to let them fill that in anyway. But if they didn't have paid time off or sick leave, you could take a deduction if they missed a full day for sickness and you offer a bona fide sick leave plan. That's a key word. A bona fide sick leave plan is a plan that offers at least 5 paid days per year that can be used towards sickness. Okay, let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about, which is the new Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This passed. It was signed yesterday, if I recall correctly. All the days are running together now. And it appears that it will be effective on April 2nd. It takes effect 15 days from the time of enactment. We're all pretty sure that's April 2nd. So what are the highlights of this law? Well, first up, we've got FMLA expansion, although it didn't expand nearly as much as originally intended. We've got paid sick leave, and we've got a payroll tax credit for employers. Let's talk about each of those. All right, coverage for the FMLA expansion. This applies to all employers with fewer than 500 employees, even those with under 50 employees. So that's the expansion part. Previously, FMLA only applied if you had 50 or more employees. Now we're saying it applies to everyone under 500 with respect to this added section. We didn't make all FMLA apply to everyone. We just made this particular part apply to everyone. Employees who are healthcare providers or emergency responders don't need to be provided with this leave. So they can be exempted from this leave. You're also welcome to provide this leave. And if you can, I'd say you probably should, but you technically can exempt those individuals. Also key, the Secretary of Labor may issue regulations to exempt certain employers with fewer than 50 employees if it would jeopardize their viability as a company. So if it looks like you would go under trying to provide this benefit, you may be eligible for an exemption. This is absolutely not saying that what we really mean is everybody under 50 is exempt. That's not what this means. The money that's paid out, you, the employer, will get back. So the only problem would be like if you can't advance this money at all, and that would absolutely put you out of business to advance any of these funds, then you could potentially be exempt, but you'd need to go through the Secretary of Labor to figure that out. We have no idea how that works yet. This bill was written really quickly. It's actually very short. I think it's only like 85 or 90 pages. That's very short for federal legislation. Plus, it's packed full of other stuff. The part on FMLA expansion may only be a couple of pages. So we don't know how this works yet. There will definitely be regulations and agency guidance coming out, hopefully as soon as humanly possible, but certainly I would think by April 2nd when this thing takes effect. So we will be updating our website with any guidance, any forms to fill out, anything we find out at all. We're going to put that up there as fast as we can. But at this exact moment, we don't have any more information than what I'm showing you on these slides and what you'll see when we send you the slide deck in a couple of hours, okay? So please don't call us with follow-ups. We don't know how this works yet. And it's not that we didn't look. It's just the information literally does not exist in the world. So we're all, hanging on, waiting for it together. The only thing the new FMLA expansion does is allow employees to take time off to care for a child under 18 if the child's school or place of care, like their daycare or the Montessori school or whatever, is closed for a public health emergency. So, I'm in Oregon. All schools are closed through April 28th. So if I had a child, I would I would qualify for this. I would be home caring for my child because, you know, their place of you know, their school place was closed. This only applies, though, if the employee can't work from home. So if somebody can work from home, you can absolutely make them work from home. You don't have to say, oh, this is just, you know, free vacation to hang out with your kid for, you know, 2 weeks or 6 weeks or however long. But, you know, if they work on a manufacturing line and there's just absolutely no way that they can do any work from home, that's when this kicks in, is when working from home is not a possibility. And again, the only expansion applies to caring for a child under 18. And only if their school closed. So what are the pay provisions around this? Well, there's no pay for the first 10 days of leave under the FMLA expansion. So the first 10 days, you're home taking care of your kid and you can't work for your employer. That's not covered. However, that can be filled in with any other available sick leave, including the new emergency sick leave that I'm going to talk about on the next slide. Okay. So chances are somebody who needs to take time off to watch their kid will first take a couple of weeks of that emergency paid sick leave, and then they will look to the FMLA expansion to help them cover the rest. After those first 10 days, pay is going to be at 2/3 of their regular rate of pay for the number of hours they would normally be scheduled to work, up to a cap of $200 a day or $10,000 total. So how do we pay for this? Well, that payroll tax credit has been mentioned. So the bill provides for refundable tax credit equal to 100% of qualified paid sick or family leave wages that you, the employer, pay out for each calendar quarter. So all the money that you're giving to employees, you will get back when it's time to pay taxes. You're just going to take it right off the top of your tax bill. And it looks like even if you pay out more than you would have owed in taxes, you'll somehow get a credit for that. We're not sure how that works yet. Not because we haven't looked, because nobody knows. I don't know if it'll be a credit towards the next quarter's tax bill or if they'll actually like cut you a check. We're unclear on that. I suspect it would be a credit toward the next quarter, but I'm not sure. So you will get this money back. You're just fronting the money. It's not coming out of your pocket as an employer forever. The Treasury Secretary also said that they'll be using their regulatory authority to advance funds to employers, particularly for small businesses or for employers who have cash deposited with the IRS already. So again, that wasn't explained at all. That was actually just the the Treasury Secretary talking. I found that quote, I think, in an article. So that's not written straight into the bill, but it sounds like they realize that there are going to be employers who can't front the money until next quarter, and they're going to try to work with you to get you some funds now so you can actually, pay your employees. All right, let's talk about that emergency sick leave now. So coverage on this one, again, it's all private employers with fewer than 500 employees. So that means you, small employer, if you've got, less than 50, this still applies to you. If you have less than 10, this still applies to you. It applies to everybody. And it also applies to all employees, no matter how long they've been employed for you. So we know FMLA has all these requirements about how many hours and how many months they've worked. None of that applies here for emergency paid sick leave. If you hired them like 2 weeks ago, they're still eligible for this. Once again, we can exclude employees who are healthcare providers or emergency responders. And once again, the Secretary of Labor might issue regulations to exempt employers who have fewer than 50 employees if it would jeopardize their viability as a company. Again, hopefully there will be some funds that can be just provided to you to give out if you can't come up with them yourself. If that doesn't work out, isn't possible, whatever, it looks like there will be some kind of exemption process. But again, we don't know what that looks like yet. So what can this emergency paid sick leave be used for? It can be used if an employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. I believe this applies to an employee specifically, like they have been told by their local health department that they individually should stay home. It's possible this could apply when, an entire state shuts down and says, everybody stay home. We don't know yet. We'll get back to you. As soon as we do, we'll let you know. If the isolation order, if that's interpreted broadly, then it could be for anybody who's told to stay home if they can't work. But it's also possible that means very specifically that if an employee is told that you need to isolate or you need to quarantine, that this applies for them. And that would make sense since we're calling it sick leave. We're not calling it, quarantine leave or stay at home leave. It's for sickness. It also applies if they've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. So, if I had a sick relative that lived in my home and my doctor said, you should really stay home because, you're probably a walking petri dish, that would apply here as well. It also applies if we're seeking medical diagnosis for symptoms of COVID-19, to care for an individual who qualifies under number 1 or number 2, or to care for a child if their school or their place of care is closed. It also has this weird number 6 option, which is when experiencing other substantially similar conditions. And we don't know what that means yet. As soon as some regulatory agencies fill in the blank on what a substantially similar condition is, we'll let you know. So how much do people get for emergency paid sick leave? Well, full-time employees can take up to 80 hours. Part-time employees get the number of hours they work on average in 2 weeks. So if they're an exactly half-time employee, they'll get 40 hours of paid emergency sick leave. There are caps of $510 a day or $5,110 total for uses 1, 2, and 3. On the previous slide, again, we'll send you the slide deck so this will all make sense when you see it. And there's a cap of $200 a day and $2,000 total for uses 4, 5, and 6. And that's like when you're caring for someone else. Okay, let's talk about things you'll be thinking about if your business is reducing hours or closing. So you might be in an area where state or local authorities are closing everything down. You might be closing down because you just don't have business right now. If you're a restaurant or a coffee shop, even if your city hasn't gone full shutdown, it's possible that people just aren't leaving the house. And so you're going to reduce everyone's hours or possibly, shut down for a day or a week or a month. Let's talk about those issues that come up. Just to be clear, though, for anything related to unemployment insurance details, like how much an employee will get, how to fill out the forms, who they should talk to, whether the state has lifted waiting weeks or changed requirements or, has a different base period than they used to under the circumstances. All that information, the state unemployment or the state employment department, as they usually like to call themselves, that's going to be your source for information. I know their phone lines are jammed, but we can't keep up right now with what the states are doing with respect to unemployment insurance. We're trying to sort of compile those links at least, so we have them, but for specific details related to unemployment insurance, especially related to each individual employee, that really needs to, the onus sort of needs to be on the employee to figure it out, to talk to the state agency. Okay, so can you reduce hours or pay for non-exempt employees? Yes, you absolutely can. Non-exempt employees only need to be paid for hours worked. So, just because they usually have a 40-hour week schedule, if you need to reduce them to 30, they're not entitled to 40 just because they usually get 40. We can go ahead and just pay them for the 30 hours they are going to work this week or did work this week, I should say. One more reminder about reporting time pay. So if you send people home halfway through the day and you're in one of the states that has this quick list, California, Connecticut, DC, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, if you're in any of those states, you'll want to look into reporting time pay if you send somebody home partway through the day. You can even reduce employees' hourly wage. That is not necessarily unreasonable under these circumstances. So if you've got, a lot of hourly workers who are currently making $20 an hour, and you'd like to do an across-the-board pay cut for everybody in order to not have to fire anyone outright, that's definitely your prerogative as a business owner. You can have everybody take a pay cut. Remember, though, they do need to stay above minimum wage. And will still be entitled to overtime. So people can't volunteer to work overtime and not be paid for it. Sort of obligations under the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, those can't be waived. An employee can't opt to work for less than minimum wage for you. Even if they, sign in blood, that's not going to hold up in court. So don't let people work for less than minimum wage, even if they want to. If they change their mind later about how benevolent they were feeling, they could absolutely bring a wage and hour claim against you, even if it was their idea in the first place. If you reduce wages, hourly wages, not hours, but actual pay per hour, you want to make sure you're checking for any state notice requirements. Most states just say that you need to tell the employee before it happens. So, if starting tomorrow you want to reduce everybody's pay, you need to send notice out today that says, hey, when you show up at work tomorrow, you're going to be working at a different rate of pay. Here's what it is. California, of course, is a bit of a snowflake on that one, and I think they might require a whole week of notice before reducing someone's pay. We didn't have time to get into every state in this webinar clearly, but you may want to check state law just to see if there are any notice requirements before reducing someone's income. And then you also want to make sure you're not doing it retroactively if you're mid-pay period. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you give notice that employees' pay will change on the 10th of the month, and your payroll period runs from the 1st through the 15th, make sure that their next check still reflects the higher rate of pay for the first 9 days of that payroll period. Okay? So we can't give them the notice that we're reducing their pay and then reach back for the whole payroll period that they were in the middle of and give them the lower rate. We need to make sure we're doing it by the day. We can also reduce pay for exempt employees. So these are your manager types, right? The people who are generally paid on a salary. They're not entitled to overtime. We can work them a lot if we want. You can implement a pay cut either across the board or for certain departments or certain types of jobs. Do check for unintentional discrimination. So let's say you've got an all-male sales team and an all-female admin team, and that might be less common these days, but it's certainly not unheard of. If you decide that the admins will take a 40% pay cut while the sales guys will keep their usual wages, that could be problematic down the road for you. Granted, if the sales team's still doing, 100 or 150% of their usual work, while the admin team is only half as busy in the slowdown, then that's going to look pretty reasonable. Just make sure that you're documenting why you did it that way, okay? If you're issuing salary cuts that aren't across the board. An across-the-board salary cut, that's a very safe option. Do remember, though, that just like non-exempt employees not going below minimum wage, our exempt employees can't go below the federal minimum salary for exempt employees, or the state minimum salary if you have one of those. So the federal minimum went up to $684 a week on January 1st of this year. So even if you cut their hours in half, they still have to make $684 a week. California's minimum is between $960 and $1,040 per week, depending on employer size. And New York is $885 per week to $1,125 per week, depending on where employers are located. So those are the two states with much, much higher minimums that I want to point out. A couple other states have slightly higher than federal minimums, like a couple bucks. But California and New York, certainly you want to make sure that you're not going below those fairly high minimum exempt salaries if you do an exempt employee pay cut. The next question then becomes, well, okay, I have to cut my exempt employees way down. So they're not going to meet the federal minimum, but I'm not having them work nearly as hard. You know, I only need 15 hours a week right now instead of 50. Can I reclassify them? The answer is yes, you can reclassify an exempt employee as non-exempt, but it needs to not be just to avoid the salary basis requirements under the FLSA. So really just don't do it on a short-term basis. You know, if you've got somebody who's like, oh, on the week you work 60 hours, I call you exempt. But on the week where you only work 30 hours, I call you non-exempt because I only want to pay you for 30 hours. We can't flip back and forth like that. That's clearly an attempt to evade the requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act. But if we're doing it because it's clear the business has slowed down massively and we want to avoid layoffs, and we have no idea when business will pick back up, it could be 6 weeks or it could be 6 months or it could be never. This is not going to look unreasonable. It's not going to look like evasion. I wouldn't do this for less than a month. This is not written in stone anywhere. These are just sort of my feelings. Don't take this as legal advice either. You might want to talk to counsel if you're planning to do this. I think a month or more under the circumstances when it's well documented is probably going to be safe. Once again, though, make sure you're meeting any state notice requirements about, salary reductions, and also make sure that you're not applying it retroactively if you're already halfway through a pay period. So same deal as with the non-exempt employees there. All right, these are some words that are getting thrown around a lot right now. So let's talk through them. What's a furlough? What are your options if business is slowing down? A furlough is a temporary reduction in hours worked or weeks of work. So this could be telling your employees, we only need you for 10 hours this week. Or you could be saying, you know what, we're going to close for 2 weeks. We'll see you all soon. This probably involves an estimated date of reopening. Maybe not an exact date under our current crazy circumstances, but you're at least going to guesstimate when you would reopen. So a furlough, generally, the person is going to stay on the payroll and you're just sort of like holding in place or reducing their hours. A temporary layoff is a layoff with the intention of rehiring, generally within 6 months. So if you're subject to WARN notices don't apply if you're laying someone off for 6 months or less. That's sort of like my gauge. Federal law has weighed in a little bit on what's temporary versus permanent. It's 6 months. So let's go with that. And then a permanent layoff is, of course, a layoff with no anticipated rehire date. Like if you just think your company is probably going to go under as a result of all of this, which would be terrible, that's probably, that's going to be a permanent layoff. You shouldn't need to use these magic words for your employees to get unemployment insurance, okay? Whether it's for reduced hours or complete lack of work, they will get unemployment insurance, almost certainly. The employment department know what's going on right now, and while they're no doubt overwhelmed, they're in the business of helping people make rent. So we do want to send our employees to them to figure out, how to get the process started. Keep in mind, though, like you're writing a letter to employees about how you're going to put them on a furlough or a temporary layoff, they probably don't know what those words mean. So it's important that you convey your intent. Say, we're closing the office for 2 to 6 weeks, depending on how things unfold and what's required by the local health department. You all still have jobs with us, but we won't have enough work to justify staying open again for the next 2 to 6 weeks. Just be really clear with what your intention is. Which sort of brings us to the next slide, which is you want to make sure you communicate in writing. Acknowledge this is a rough time for everyone. It's rough for you. It's definitely rough for the employees who are being sent home. Particularly if that's without any kind of pay or coverage. In all likelihood, the current paid sick leave does not apply for these people. They don't get emergency paid sick leave just because you closed down and had no work for them. They will get unemployment insurance, though, so that's important to keep in mind. If you are closing and they don't have work, they can get unemployment insurance. Sort of a note here, make sure you have current contact info for your employees. If you're used to communicating with them via, just work email addresses, you might not know how to contact them once they sort of go home and stay home. Make sure you've got a good phone number and probably a personal email as well. You'll want to check with your broker about your health insurance benefit offering. So a reduction in hours could cause a loss of benefits eligibility. That's going to depend, though, on your specific plan's eligibility criteria. So you need to figure out what those are. If employees do lose eligibility for your health insurance plan, then other plan provisions will kick in. So in all likelihood, that means the employee will be eligible for COBRA or for mini COBRA under your state, or portability or conversion for life insurance. These are just things that you need to look into, okay, before we put people on furlough and sort of make guesses about how their health benefits will function. Once again, employees are going to be eligible for unemployment insurance. And a lot of states are waiving waiting weeks right now, so they won't necessarily have to be out of work for 1 or 2 weeks. I think states are also waiving work search requirements. But again, this is all at the state level, and it's all changing very quickly. So you and employees should keep an eye on state resources. I would strongly encourage you to watch as many local news sources as you can to find out what's going on. An unfortunate question we're getting is, what if I can't make payroll? And the answer to that is you really need to call an attorney. If you aren't going to be able to pay everyone their full wages, you should talk to counsel, because depending on what state you operate in, how much your employees make, how many employees you have, your liability for that could change dramatically. Whether you decide to pay everyone partially, some people not at all. These are things that an attorney can help you work through, and they will vary significantly depending on where you operate. So just keep that in mind. And then finally, I wanted to offer one slide of hopefulness here. The Small Business Administration has said that they're going to work directly with state governors to provide low interest loans to small businesses and nonprofits that are severely impacted by COVID-19 and the coronavirus. And I know that's a lot of you who are listening in right now. So this program will provide loans of up to $2 million for small businesses to help support you under the circumstances. So to find more information on that, again, when you get the slide deck, you'll see this in writing, but you can go to sba.gov/disaster. So one more time for those listening online, SBA, like Small Business Administration, .gov/disaster, and get in the queue for that if you can and you think it's going to be necessary for you. All right, that is the extent of my content today. I'm going to pass it back right now.
Great. And Kara, if you could switch to the next slide really quickly. So for those, let me just touch on these really. I know we're top of the hour, but really, really fast here. So Kara, first of all, thank you. Will we be doing more webinars? Yes. For those of you who only heard audio today, will you get a recording with the slides? Yes. Those of you who asked questions, and there were literally hundreds of you, we had a total of 13,000 people on this live presentation today. We will be compiling those questions, aggregating them into an FAQ document that we will be both posting to our blog and sharing via email to everyone who registered today. So thinkhr.com is the blog, is where you'll find the blog. For those of you, I know many of you are with ThinkHR and have access to ThinkHR, which means you know what Comply is. We have an amazing resource center. If you've not gone in there, we encourage you to go in there. It is updated almost by the hour right now. So go in and get a lot of the resources that Kara has spoken to today, as well as updates. We know that this is a very fluid situation. More webinars are coming. So in particular, for those who had trouble today, we're moving over to Zoom for future webinars, and we will not have technical difficulties for next webinar. Thank you for your patience. Again, had 13,000 people on today, and it was just difficult to manage. If you are a Think HR client, feel free to email us. But of course, keep in mind, this is record volume for us, and so we would love for you to rely on Comply and external resources first, and then to the extent that we can support you additionally there, we'd love to be able to do so. And then, Kara, if you just jump back to the previous slide, we know many of you don't know who Think HR is. No problem. This is who we are. This is what we do. We provide these resources, both live HR support and online. We're going to send a survey out following the webinar in your inbox that will accompany the recording and the slides. If you'd like to learn more about how to access, you actually can't buy our services. It's a sponsored service, but we can give you some information on how to access that through HR service providers you probably already have relationships with. So that's it for us. Look in your inbox. In the next 30 minutes, you'll get a recording. You will get the slides. You will get a survey. Part of the survey is to ask a question about what questions that you wanted to get addressed today that didn't. So for those of you on live stream who did not get to submit questions, you will get to do so there. And again, we will be compiling all the answers over the next few days into an FAQ summary, and look out for that for your inbox as well. And just generally speaking, look in your inbox, because we're going to be sending, at least to the Think HR folks, a lot of resources and information in the coming days and weeks as you navigate this very complex and ever-changing situation. Kara, thank you. Everyone who is online, thank you. Vimeo, thank you. GoToWebinar, thank you. Stay tuned for more information from us.